Violence in American schools. How safe are our schools? You have probably read or heard reports about the frequency of crime in the United States, particularly among juveniles. According to figures compiled by the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention, 16% of all juveniles, any individual below the age of 18, were arrested in 2009 for committing violent crimes. This is the lowest level of juvenile violent crime since 1980. Because the kinds of behaviors one observes in schools tend to reflect trends in society at large, it is natural that a certain amount of violent behavior occurs on school grounds and during school hours. However, schools are still relatively safe places. One basis for that claim is that the most common types of school-based conflicts fall into a few time-honored categories: verbal harassment, name-calling, insults, teasing; verbal arguments and physical fights, hitting, kicking, scratching, and pushing. Most of the fights do not involve serious injury or violations of law. In 2009, for example, only 1% of students aged 12 to 18 reported being the victim of a violent crime, assault, being threatened with a weapon, etc., and less than 1% reported being the victim of serious violence, rape, robbery, aggravated assault. Here are some of the key findings from a recent government report on school-based violence. During the 2009-10 school year, 17 school-age students, ages 5 through 19, were murdered at school. This translates to less than one homicide per million students for that one-year period. In 2009, 4% of students ages 12 through 18 reported being the victim of some form of violence at school. 8% of high school students were threatened or injured with a weapon within a 12-month period. 5% of students ages 12 through 18 reported avoiding school activities or one or more places at school because they feared for their own safety. The percentage of teachers threatened with injury by a student decreased from 12% during the 93-94 school year to 7% during the 7-8 school year. That percentage of teachers who were physically attacked stayed at the same 4% level as was recorded for 93-94. The percentage of elementary grade teachers who were attacked was 3 times as great as the percentage of secondary grade teachers, 6% versus 2% respectively. These findings suggest that most teachers and students are likely to be physically safe in their own classrooms and school buildings. Nevertheless, school violence can occur in any school at any time and can be perpetuated by outsiders. Witness the tragedy at Sandy Hook Elementary School in 2012. Accordingly, you should be aware of the various explanations of school violence and the steps that can be taken to reduce its frequency. The problem of bullying. Although bullying has existed for as long as there have been schools and students, it is now recognized as a significant part of the school violence problem. In recent years, there have been several highly publicized cases where bullying resulted in fights, depression, or suicide. Numerous studies have been conducted and scores of books have been written about various aspects of bullying. In this section, we will take a brief look at what bullying is and how often it occurs, what characterizes a bully, what effects it has on its victims, and how schools can reduce bullying and its negative effects. What is bullying? Bullying can be defined as the repeated, not just once, harming of another through words or physical attack on the school grounds or on the way to or from school. A similar definition calls it the systematic abuse of power in interpersonal relationships. In essence, bullying is a situation in which one person has more power than another and repeatedly abuses that power for his or her own benefit. Some of the findings on bullying might surprise you. Although it occurs all too frequently, it is not the runaway problem that some might think given the coverage it gets in the media. In 2009, 28% of 12 to 18-year-olds reported having been bullied at least once. More girls than boys engage in bullying when you look at all of its forms. Girls are more likely than boys to use name-calling and insults, start and repeat rumors, and exclude others from activities. The bullying behavior of boys, on the other hand, is more likely to take such physical forms as pushing, shoving, tripping, or spitting on someone else and trying to make someone else do things that they do not want to do. Another aspect of bullying that surprises many people is that it occurs more frequently in middle school than in high school. And as students move from grade to grade, a decrease in the rate of bullying usually occurs. Although bullying often involves face-to-face encounters, it does not always take that form because of the prevalence of social networking websites. This form of bullying, in which one or more students post malicious statements about another student, is referred to as cyberbullying. Given the different styles of bullying behavior shown by boys and girls, it will probably not surprise you to learn that girls are more likely than boys to engage in cyberbullying. 7% versus 5%. There are some characteristics of cyberbullying that make it different from face-to-face bullying. First, it is anonymous. Those who use social networking websites such as Facebook and Twitter to bully others are known online only by their fictitious screen names. Second, because the internet is designed to allow social exchanges among people anywhere in the world, the number of people who bully one or more others online, and the number of people who passively watch can be quite large. In one case, 500 students logged onto a Facebook page that solicited and posted malicious rumors about students at a middle school. Third, the bullying can be constant. Threatening, insulting, or teasing emails can bombard a target student all day, every day. Unless taken down, website postings are constantly available for everyone to see. Characteristics of bullies. How are students who bully differ from other students? They're different in terms of internal characteristics, their relationship with teachers and classmates, and the quality of their home life. Students who engage in bullying behavior are more likely than their non-bullying peers to exhibit aggressive, impulsive behavior. They are often described by their teachers as being hyperactive, disruptive, likely to act without thinking of the consequences, and inclined to respond aggressively when provoked by peers. Students who engage in bullying report getting less support from their classmates and teachers. That is, they are less likely than other students to feel there is someone at school, either a friend or a teacher, who they can talk to about their problems. Children who engage in bullying are more likely to have witnessed domestic violence and are less likely to have a close relationship with their mother than their peers who do not bully others. How bullying affects its victims. Being a victim of bullying can produce any one or more of the following negative effects: staying home from school, avoiding certain places at school, asking to transfer to another school, lower grades due to difficulty concentrating on schoolwork, particularly if the victim believes he or she is not being supported by parents or teachers, feelings of depression, anxiety, and insecurity that produce physical ailments, social isolation. How schools can address bullying. There are two ways that educators can deal with the problem of bullying. One is to implement school-wide programs to reduce its frequency. These can take many forms, such as teaching students who witness such incidents to report them immediately or to intervene, promoting rules that discourage discrimination, using videos, speakers, and discussions to make students aware of the feelings of bullies and their victims, and teaching those who bully more appropriate forms of social interaction. Research findings on the effects of school-wide programs have been mixed. An analysis of 16 studies found significantly positive effects for only 11 out of 28 outcome measures. Some of the stronger effects were students reporting being bullied or witnessing bullying, knowledge of bullying prevention, greater peer acceptance, increased self-esteem, and decreased discipline referrals. The other approach is for individual teachers to establish a classroom atmosphere that buffers bullying victims from its negative effects. Research has shown, for example, that students who feel valued and accepted by both their classmates and their teacher are less likely to demonstrate the negative effects of bullying than peers who do not believe they have that kind of social support. Analyzing reasons for violence. Biological factors. Understanding the relationship between biology and violence requires multidisciplinary research and theory. The connection between biology and violence is mediated by geography, demography, sociology, psychology, criminology, and epidemiology, among others. We focus here on revisiting a connection we first encountered in Chapter 5, addressing cultural and socioeconomic diversity. In our discussion of the experiences of students from low socioeconomic status, homelessness being one, we saw that the effects of adverse childhood experiences, measured by the ACE scale, high ACE scores, meaning a student has experienced many adverse events and conditions, were related to both health and behavioral problems, including violent behavior. Adverse childhood experiences cause stress. The body's reaction to stress, a process called allostasis, increases allostatic load. If a child has many adverse experiences over an extended period of time, as many children living in poverty do, their stress response systems get overloaded. In other words, they carry a very heavy allostatic load. Evans and Schomburg found that high allostatic load can adversely affect cognitive functioning. Children and adolescents who experience a great deal of stress are more likely to engage in violent behavior. Gender-related cultural influences. As noted in the discussion of age-level characteristics in an earlier chapter, there is evidence that young girls in our society are encouraged to be dependent and to be eager to please adults, whereas young boys are encouraged to assert their independence. Furthermore, it appears that boys are more likely than girls to be reinforced by aggressive and antisocial peers for assertive and illegal forms of behavior. These gender-related cultural influences may partly account for the fact that boys are more likely than girls to engage in such overt aggressive behaviors as fighting, bullying, robbing, and sexual assault, and particularly in the latter elementary and middle school years, such covert aggressive behaviors as stealing, lying, vandalism, and setting fires. Girls, on the other hand, are more likely than boys to engage in what is called relational aggression, the withholding or termination of friendships and other social contacts, and spreading rumors to hurt another girl's feelings. The same reasoning may well apply to disruptive behavior in the classroom. A boy who talks back to the teacher or shoves another boy in a skirmish in the cafeteria is probably more likely to draw a favorable response from peers than is a girl who exhibits the same behavior. This cultural difference adds to the physiological factors that predispose boys to express frustration and hostility in physical and assertive ways. Academic skills and performance. Boys also seem more likely than girls to experience feelings of frustration and hostility in school. For a variety of reasons, more rapid maturity, desire to please adults, superiority in verbal skills, girls earn higher grades on the average than boys do. A low grade almost inevitably arouses feelings of resentment and anger. In fact, any kind of negative evaluation is a very direct threat to a student's self-esteem. Thus, a middle school, junior high, or high school boy who has received an unbroken succession of low grades and is unlikely to graduate may experience extreme frustration and anger. Even low-achieving students are likely to be aware that their chances of getting a decent job are severely limited by the absence of a high school diploma. Older high school boys can escape further humiliation by dropping out of school, but middle school and junior high boys cannot legally resort to the same solution, which may partially explain why, as of 2005, the crime rate at schools is slightly higher among 6th, 7th, and 8th graders than among high school students. Not really. Interpersonal reasoning and problem-solving skills. Children who exhibit aggressive and violent behaviors do so in part because of deficiencies in how they think about social situations. One example is known as hostile attribution bias. Aggressive individuals are more likely than others to misinterpret another person's actions or facial expressions as hostile and to respond in kind. Two other deficiencies relate to the ability to formulate realistic plans to satisfy social goals and the ability to think of several possible solutions to interpersonal problems. The former skill is referred to as means-end thinking, and the latter is called alternative solution thinking. Students who are deficient in these two interpersonal problem-solving skills are more likely than others to show an inability to delay gratification, to have difficulty making friends, to have emotional blow-ups when frustrated, to show less sympathy to others in distress, and to exhibit verbal and physical aggression. Psychosocial factors. Other explanations of violent behavior and or aggressive behavior in school are supplied by Erik Erikson's and James Marcia's observations on identity, which we discussed in the chapter on stage theories of development. A teenager who has failed to make a clear occupational choice, who is confused about gender roles, or who does not experience acceptance by those who count, may exhibit what Erikson called a negative identity. Instead of striving to behave in ways that parents and teachers respond to positively, teenagers with negative identities may deliberately engage in opposite forms of behavior. This hypothesis has been supported by a study of 2,000 middle and high school students. Those classified as having a diffusion identity status, no serious thought given or commitment made to occupational and gender roles, were much more likely than adolescents classified as having an achievement status to exhibit behaviors characteristic of both a conduct disorder and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. School environment. So far, we have mentioned the role of biological, gender-related, cultural, academic, cognitive, and psychosocial factors in school violence. Each of these explanations places the responsibility for violent behavior largely or entirely on the individual. Other explanations focus instead on schools that are poorly designed and do not meet the needs of their students. Violent behavior in this view is seen as a natural, though unacceptable, response to schools that are too large, impersonal, and competitive, that do not enforce rules fairly or consistently, that use punitive ways of resolving conflict, and that impose an unimaginative, meaningless curriculum on the students. Reducing school violence, bullying, and misbehavior. Classroom interventions. Because most teachers work with 24 or more students, some of whom have disabilities and typically have no assistance, classroom interventions that are designed to prevent misbehavior and keep small disruptives from escalating into serious problems need to be both effective and easy to implement. One such intervention, which has been shown to work with mainstreamed students with behavior disorders as well as with regular students, is called the good behavior game. It is based on the group contingency concept that we mentioned in Chapter 7, Behavioral Learning Theory, Operant Conditioning. The reinforcement contingency used in the good behavior game is called the interdependent group contingency because it allows all students in a group or in an entire class to receive reinforcement as long as the group's performance meets or exceeds some specified level of performance, such as an average grade on a homework assignment or not exceeding a certain number of classroom rule violations. The advantage of this system is that all students must participate and make a contribution, but the group is not automatically denied reinforcement if a small number of students do not perform as well as the others. The good behavior game was designed to prevent or reduce such highly disruptive behaviors as verbal and physical aggression, but it has also been used to moderate out-of-seat behavior, excessive talking, and low levels of classroom participation. Another violence reduction program that has shown positive results was devised for ethnic minority students in grades 3 through 6, but is applicable to all types of students. Initially called Brain Power, but later changed to Best Foot Forward when the scope of the program was expanded. The program is designed to help students realize that the negative actions of others, such as when a classmate bumps into them or knocks their books off their desk, can have one of several causes. It may have been accidental, an attempt to be helpful, or, least likely, it may have been deliberately hostile. Students who are on the receiving end of the negative action are taught how to respond to these incidents in non-aggressive and appropriate ways. If, for example, they are sure the negative behavior was intentional, they are taught to report the incident to an adult. Students who initiate the incident are taught how to apologize and explain the reasons for their behavior. For example, on bumping into another student, the first student might say, "Sorry, I tripped and accidentally bumped into you." Evaluations of the program have shown that in comparison to a control group, those in the program were less likely to think that they were the deliberate target of a hostile act become less angry and less often, and were less likely to respond aggressively. There are, of course, many other effective class-wide approaches to managing student behavior that space limitations do not allow us to discuss. Aside from the two mentioned above, we suggest you also read about judicious discipline, the classroom checkup, and positive peer reporting. Across these programs, there's an emphasis on praising desired student behavior. School-wide programs to reduce violence and improve discipline. Although classroom interventions, such as the ones described in the previous section, can make life less threatening and more enjoyable for individual teachers and their students, they do not address disruptive behavior elsewhere in a school, and they may conflict with other teachers' procedures. Consequently, some educators have designed violence reduction programs that can be implemented throughout an entire school. This section describes 3 such approaches. While each program has proved successful in reducing aspects of school violence, they are not unusual in that regard. An analysis of research on 74 school-based violence reduction programs found that most produced reductions in criminal behavior, suspensions from school, and physical violence. Unified discipline. In a program called Unified Discipline, teachers, administrators, and other school personnel create a uniform approach to managing disruptive behavior. The goal of unified discipline is to create a consensus about the following program elements. Attitudes. The school staff members agree that all students can improve their behavior, that learning to manage one's behavior is an important part of education, that corrections for misbehavior should be administered in a professional manner, and that becoming angry with students for misbehaving undermines a teacher's instructional effectiveness. Expectations. The school staff members agree to the rules for student behavior and to use the program's correction procedures in the same way whenever a student breaks the rule. Rules. The rules that govern student behavior are typically divided into categories. One school, for example, created a 3-level system. Class 3 rules pertain to such behaviors as physically assaulting another person, bringing a weapon to school, and selling drugs, tobacco, or alcohol. Class 2 rules pertain to behaviors such as fighting, ignoring adult requests, and vandalism. Class 1 rules pertain to behaviors such as disrupting others and using inappropriate language. The rules that govern classroom behavior have to be, of course, appropriate to the student's grade level. One group of kindergarten through 2nd grade teachers decided that students had to follow all teacher directions promptly, speak in an appropriate voice, keep body parts to themselves, and stay in their assigned places. Teachers in grades 3 through 5 decided that students had to follow all teacher directions promptly, stay on task, be prepared for class, raise their hands to be recognized, and respect the rights and properties of others. Correction procedures. As with rules, correction procedures vary somewhat by grade level. In the lower grades of one school, the first offense results in the teachers putting a green ticket in a pocket with the student's name on it. The pocket is stapled to a poster board. The second offense results in a yellow ticket. At the third offense, the student receives a red ticket and has to sit in an exclusion area of the classroom for several minutes. For a fourth offense, the student gets a blue ticket and is sent to another room for a timeout of about 20 minutes. In the upper grades, students receive a verbal correction for a first offense, a loss of privilege for a second offense, and a timeout for a third offense. For students of all ages, teachers respond to infractions by stating the misbehavior, stating the rule that was violated, stating the consequence, and encouraging the student to follow the rule in the future. Roles. The principal's role is to support teachers when they follow the unified discipline procedures and, for the most serious offenses, make decisions about consequences based on a student's needs, history, and the circumstances surrounding the misbehavior. A refreshing change from the mindless uniform punishments dictated by zero-tolerance policies. The teacher's role is to support the principal and not engage in second-guessing with other teachers, students, or parents. In one elementary school, the Unified Discipline Program resulted in a 20% decrease in referrals of students to the principal's office during the first year and decreases of 50% or more in subsequent years, fewer violations of classroom rules, and increases in the amount of time students spent on task. Smart and good high schools. Despite reports in the media of such troubling behaviors among high school students as cheating, drug use, alcohol abuse, bullying, and disrespect towards teachers, some high schools are successful in helping their students develop positive character traits. Licona and Davidson studied the operations of 24 high schools that had been identified by at least one organization, such as the Department of Education or the Coalition of Essential Schools, as being exemplary in an effort to determine how they, as being exemplary, I think, in an effort to determine how they help students develop their characters. This collection of schools was quite diverse in terms of size, 300 students on the small end and 4,300 students on the large end, type, public, private, and charter, and setting, urban, suburban, and rural. Licona and Davidson defined character as being composed of two main parts, performance character and moral character. Performance character includes such components as diligence, a strong work ethic, a positive attitude, and perseverance, and it contributes to successful academic performance. Moral character includes such components as integrity, respect, cooperation, and justice, and it contributes to productive, fulfilling personal relationships. High schools that help students develop these two aspects of character are, in their words, smart and good high schools. The high schools that Licona and Davidson identified as being smart and good employed a variety of devices to help students become lifelong learners and critical thinkers, diligent and capable performers, socially, emotionally skilled, more attuned to the ethical implications of their behaviors, respectful and responsible, self-disciplined, contributors to their community, and oriented toward creating a purposeful life. Whether such schools are judged to be more successful than other schools at reducing undesirable student behaviors has yet to be determined. Resolving conflict creatively program. A somewhat different approach to decreasing physical violence, particularly between students, is the Resolving Conflict Creatively program, created by Lattieri in 1985. RCCP was designed as a primary prevention program. This means that all students, even those not prone to violence, are taught how to prevent disagreements from becoming violent confrontations. The goal of this program is to teach students how to use nonviolent conflict resolution techniques in place of their more normal and more violent methods. Students are trained by teachers to monitor the school environment, such as the playground, the cafeteria, and the hallways, for imminent or actual physical confrontations between students. For example, picture two students who are arguing about a comment that struck one as an insult. As the accusations and counter-accusations escalate, one student threatens to hit the other. At that moment, one or two other students who are wearing t-shirts with the word mediator printed across the front and back intervene and ask if the two students would like to help in resolving their problem. The mediating students may suggest that they all move to a quieter area where they can talk. The mediators then establish certain ground rules, such as that each student gets a turn to talk without being interrupted, and that name-calling is not allowed. Evaluations of RCCP in several school districts report such positive outcomes as gains in interpersonal negotiation strategies, pro-social behavior and academic achievement, and decreases in academic behavior, in aggressive behavior, decreases in aggressive behavior. As a result, the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention has given RCCP an effective rating. Using technology to keep students in school. As we pointed out previously, students who exhibit poor academic performance and believe that their teachers don't care about them are prone to engage in disruptive and violent behavior. They are also at risk for dropping out of school. In 2010, 7% of 16 to 24-year-olds who were born in the United States were classified as dropouts, were out of school and had not earned a diploma or alternative credential. The percentages for white, black, and Latino youths were 5%, 9%, and 10% respectively. Although these dropout rates have steadily fallen over the past 25 years, the dropout rate in 1990 was 12%, some believe that creative uses of technology may cause them to fall even faster. Here are a few examples of how some schools have used technology to reduce student absenteeism and the dropout rate. The UNME school district in California created a smart classroom to help retain students who are at risk of dropping out. Students in this program were given experience in computerized robotics, computer-aided manufacturing, desktop publishing, and aeronautics and pneumatic technology. Average daily attendance for this program was close to 100%. The Azusa Unified School District in California made extensive use of an integrated learning system to encourage student attendance and retention. Students spent 4 class periods each day working at their computer terminals on English, reading, social studies, mathematics, and science. By the end of the program's second year, the average daily attendance was 96%, and 93% of students remained in the program from one year to the next. Virtual schools, a growing phenomenon that is also referred to as distance education or distance learning, are courses or entire programs, particularly at the high school level, that are available on the web and that may help students with high absentee rates, such as the children of migrant workers, students whose schools districts don't offer desired courses, and students who are homeschooled to take courses and complete their schooling. During the 2007-8 school year, more than 1 million public school students were enrolled in virtual classes, and almost all states offer some type of online education option. Although such programs are praised for the flexibility they offer, they are also criticized because low-income students may have limited internet access, because computer failures result in lost time in assignments, and because the lack of face-to-face interaction makes learning more difficult for some students. What little research exists suggests that overall students who take courses online learn about as much as students who take the same courses in actual classrooms. What is not known at this point is why some students succeed in a virtual school environment, whereas others do not.